Welcome to Native Talk Arizona, presented by Native Health and KRDP 90.7 FM. I'm host Susan Levy. The Navajo Nation Council is the governing body of the Navajo Nation and is comprised of 24 council delegates elected from their respective legislative districts. In the studio with us today is Navajo Nation Council Delegate Eugenia Charles Newton. Hello, Eugenia, and welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, we're super excited to have you here and learn more about what you do. So before we get started, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Eugenia Charles Newton, and in Navajo, we normally start introductions with our clan to establish k'e, which is the relationship that we might have. So I am Bits'ahni, born for Ashihe. Ashche are my maternal grandparents, and Tkopaha are my paternal grandparents. And so listeners out there are probably going to say, oh, that's my sister, or that's my aunt, or, there's always that way to establish relationships. But that's the first thing that we do. I am from Shiprock, where I was raised my whole life. I went to school there, and that's the community that I currently represent on the 25th Navajo Nation Council. I am a mother, and I am a wife. I've been married for 26 and a half years, I believe. 26 years, been a long time, but still very much in love. So just a little bit about myself. I'm the chairwoman for Law and Order Committee on the 25th Navajo Nation Council. I was also the chairwoman during the 24th Navajo Nation Council. So we oversee public safety and justice on the Navajo Nation. At the federal level, I am co-chair for the Public Safety and Justice at the Tribal Interior Budget Council, which is under the Department of Interior.
Wow, you do a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. Can you tell me, what do Navajo Council delegates do? What is their job, and how are they divided or representative of their areas?
Oh, that's a great question to start off with. So we are the governing body of the Navajo Nation. So I think a lot of people think that just because we have the terms president, council delegate, chief justice of the Supreme Court, that we are equivalent to what you see at the federal and state level, but that is not true. The council is actually, because we're the governing body, we're actually a little bit more powerful than the president when we're together. So we meet 4 times a year at council. We meet based on season. So we start off with our winter, we have spring, summer, and we end with fall. And so when we come together, we legislate, we allocate funds, we are the oversight of divisions and departments, and we basically hold people accountable to their positions, or people accountable to their elected I guess basically the elected positions as well. So we are very, very powerful in that when we come together, we make decisions on behalf of the Navajo Nation, and we represent our Navajo people. And I like to say, there are some delegates who say that they represent their chapters. I like to say that I represent all the Navajo people on and off the Navajo Nation, which includes many of our Navajo people living here in the Phoenix urban area.
So is it one delegate out of the 25? There's 25
24.
of you?
24
of you.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's 24 of you. And so that's it. That's not a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're looking like at the Arizona legislature, which is many members, and there's only 24 of you, right?
Yes.
And you're only meeting 4 times a year.
Well, we meet 4 times a year for council, but
Okay.
we do meet every other Thursday. We have 5 committees under council, and one of those committees is Nabik Iatket, which is the committee of the whole, which is what it means. Nabik Iatket actually means to talk it out. But every delegate is assigned to Nabik Iatket, which is a committee, and we meet every other, we meet the second and fourth Thursday of the month. And so what happens is when legislations go through the process, or when issues go through the process, it always has to go before Nabik Iatket, before it goes to council. Now, there's 4 other committees where that might not be the case. So you have budget and finance that oversees all the money, just anything dealing with money for the Navajo Nation, whether it includes money, investments, legislations that are requesting funds. They oversee all of that. Then there is my committee, which is Law and Order Committee, which oversees public safety and justice. And I think that the term pretty much covers, what it covers: law enforcement, criminal investigations, the courts, EMT, so basically a lot of our first responders. Then there's health, education, human services, and just as the title states, health, education, human services. So that's basically social services, education, and then you have resources and development committee, which oversees all of the enterprises, anything dealing with land, anything dealing with water, anything dealing with chapters, which chapters are kind of a smaller unit of government. So council does meet 4 times a year. Legislations do go through council, but we're busy like 24/7. We do have meetings. In fact, I just got off of a meeting just now, which is why I thought I was going to be late this morning. I'm sorry about the constant emailing.
No.
But really, it's a full-time position, and we are always meeting on issues, talking things out. There's a lot of issues that we can speak on the record and we can have in open forum, and then there's a lot of issues where that may not be the case, but we are always meeting.
Okay, so in terms of, I want to back up a second. So if you were looking at like an org chart or flow chart, are you at the very top above the president and then guide him? Is that how it works? Or
somewhat?
Okay.
So council, when council, so there's a law that states that any position made by the Navajo Nation goes through what's called Nabikietska, which is one of the committees. So we approve the position of the Navajo Nation. That position then gets turned over to the president, and that's the statement that he makes on behalf of the nation. Okay. And so I know some people might disagree with me on this, but how I've explained it in a lot of ways is because we're different in the way that the federal government might see the president, where the president has a little bit more power. In our government, it was set up where one person doesn't have the power. That's why council is more powerful than the president, because you have 24 delegates. So that's 24 people that are making decisions, So there are some laws that require majority, which means 13 delegates. And there's some laws that require 2/3 of the delegates, which is 16. And then there are some laws that require 19 delegates to be in agreement. But that is, the reason for that is, not one person should be making all of the decision on behalf of the Navajo people. But that also means that we have to work with the president, because the president may have different thoughts than council, or might have information that council may have to have. So it requires a lot of working together.
I think that's a good setup.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a board. If, like, for us as a nonprofit, we have a board of directors that oversees the CEO.
Yeah.
That he has to answer. So I assume from what you're saying, that's similar?
Yeah.
That he has to answer to all of you, and you're all the decision makers.
Yes.
Okay.
And in fact, in the law, it does state that the president is the CEO.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that's a cool setup.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's different.
Well, and I think to have a lot of input from a lot of people, and not just, when you're looking at like our federal government, things like that. I think that's a good setup. Wow. A lot of people's voices, opinions, different backgrounds, different agendas, not just one person.
Well, you should also be mindful that our government setup right now is temporary. So back in the late 80s, there was a riot that took place where prior to that riot, we had a different setup, which was kind of a 2-branch government system where you had the legislative, or basically council, with the chairman who was leading council. And then you had the courts. And there was a riot that took place. And as a result of that, we wind up going to a 3-branch government, which separated the chairman, which then became the president, from council, which is, kind of interesting. But we always say this is a temporary form of government. So we're still trying to find something that fits the Navajo people.
So are you appointed or do you run?
We are elected.
You are elected.
Yeah,
okay.
we are elected. 4 years is our term as council. So we run the same time that president runs for re-election or for election. So we just completed our first year in the 25th.
And then are there term limits for you?
No. So we have 4 years, and then we rerun, but no term limits. For council, for president, it's 2 terms.
And are those 4 years also presidents?
President, 4 years.
Is also 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so since you're elected, do you do like a lot of campaigning? Is it similar to elections, federal and state and county elections in Phoenix, or is it different?
It's different. I think it's different. So I lived off the nation for about, I would say like maybe 15, 16 years. So I was I shouldn't say heavily, but I was involved in a few, political, I guess, endeavors. I won't say campaigns because they weren't really campaigns, but just kind of endeavors, things that were happening at the time in the areas that I lived in. So I know that things are a little bit different from the state, the federal, and then also the Navajo Nation. A really good example that I use all the time is at the state and at the federal level when they're campaigning, they host these dinners, right? And people pay to go to those dinners, and that's how they acquire funds to campaign, right? We see that at the state and at the federal level. On the Navajo Nation, it's kind of unheard of to do that. We feed the people, and it's free. So,
which
yeah,
the way it should be.
And we don't.
Then you don't have an interest or. Right.
Well, some people might donate. They might donate to your campaign. So like it will be food. Sometimes it will be money. But it's very different than what you see at the state and federal level. I think ours is more like, I want to say it's more of a grassroots campaign where we're meeting with people. So a lot of town halls, I guess, is equivalent to what you would see, just getting out into the community. This year actually is they're going to be electing new chapter officials. So council just got in, and chapter, which is the local government, they are going up for re-election this year.
So is your area, is it geographically based? Is that how they separate you all?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the 24 delegates. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's by districts.
Yeah.
So sort of like our geographic boundaries in Maricopa County, legislative districts, sort of.
Somewhat. Our boundaries as a delegate are determined by our chapters that we represent. So it's on the number of registered voters within that chapter. So Shiprock is the largest chapter on the Navajo Nation. It's got the largest number of voters. So there's only one delegate that represents that one chapter, whereas you might have one delegate that might have 5 chapters. But if you were to add up all of their registered voters, it would be equivalent to or pretty close to what you would see with the one chapter that I represent. So there's technically 3 delegates who represent only one chapter. That's myself, Delegate Otto So out of Tuba City, and then Delegate Shauna Claw out of Chinle. So we are the only 3 delegates that have one chapter. Every delegate has more than, they have several chapters under their, under their representation.
And just want to make sure I understand. So the reason that the 3 of you have that is because you have a larger population base underneath your area.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's not population, which is kind of crazy. It's actually based on the voter registration.
Voter reg. Okay. And then how old do you have to be to vote?
18.
Okay. And is it similar to voter registration that we do in Maricopa County or the state or federal elections, that people have to register to vote first and then they can vote?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So similar process.
Yeah.
So the Navajo Nation voter registration that I know we do down here is for your elections, correct?
No. Ours is separate. So you have to go to the Navajo Nation Elections Office to get registered. Every now and then, the Navajo Nation Election Office might come out to the urban areas to get people registered. But you go in to the election office on the Navajo Nation and you get registered that way. I've seen very little drives, like election drives in the urban areas to get people to come out and vote. And every now and then it might come out during like election of the president or, election of council, but it's very rare.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And you said you're the chair of the Public Safety Committee. And what do you all do?
Oh, wow.
So what is public safety?
So public safety encompasses law enforcement, which is our police department, our criminal investigations, who are equivalent to detectives, but our criminal investigators work hand in hand with the federal government. We also have our detention centers, our courts, our EMS that all fall under Law and Order Committee, as well as, let's say, our labor relations that handle cases dealing with employment issues. Ethics is another one. So anything dealing with courts or adjudication fall under our oversight. Now, when I say oversight, what happens is council allocates funds, and a lot of it is tied to funds, right? So we give money to these divisions and departments that say we're going to be delivering these services to the Navajo people. So we become the oversight. We ask those questions of, what is going on. So when our Navajo people come to us to say, you know what, I went over to law enforcement and I asked them, to give me a my police report, but they haven't given it to me. I need it for insurance purposes. And it's been, some time, we usually get involved and we'll ask those questions like, what is going on? Why are you not issuing out these police reports? Because it's more than one person. In most cases, it'll be more than one person. So we hold them accountable. And sometimes it might be fund related, where maybe they don't have enough people, to be making copies, or maybe it's like the cost of copying, has gone up, or, something related to that. So we can try to address that by, maybe either passing laws that help to move the process along or allocating funds to address the issue. So it is, it's very interesting in that we meet, the Law and Order Committee meets by law every second, third, and fourth Monday of the month. So we meet 3 times a month. Plus, you also have the 2 times that we meet for Nabik Ietket. And then because we're sponsoring legislations throughout the year, so our legislations might get called. So that's why I'm saying it becomes a 24/7, almost a 24/7 job, because you're constantly moving. There's so many things going on. I'm a delegate that's very involved in a lot of different things. So I am very, very busy. There's some delegates who choose my chapter. I'm only going to deal with my chapter. So that's all they do, which actually affects the workload of the other delegates because we wind up having to pick it up. So it's a little bit complicated, but I guess the best way that I can describe it is we have right now a lot of rangers that are out there, in our parks, who are maybe issuing citations for, I don't know, maybe some cases might be like illegal hunting, right? So they refer that to law enforcement. Law enforcement might say, yeah, that's outside of our jurisdiction. We can't do that. So they'll refer it back to the rangers. The rangers then have to try to address the issue. Well, that becomes an issue for the entire Navajo Nation. It doesn't matter where that illegal hunting took place. It becomes an issue for the Navajo Nation because our hunting rights are affected. And so you might have a delegate who might be in a completely different chapter who's saying, yeah, that has nothing to do with me. I don't want nothing to do with it. But if it becomes a legal issue where the Navajo Nation gets involved, then it becomes an issue on behalf of the Navajo people. So that one delegate who is saying, well, I don't care, I'm only worried about my chapter, has then have to explain to their people, if something were to, happen because of those hunting rights being affected, why they weren't involved in that issue. So it's very, very complicated. But I am very much involved in a lot of different things right now. So I am very, very busy.
So a couple things come to mind. One, when you say the word public servant, and it does sound like you work 24/7.
Yeah.
I would say you're definitely a public servant.
Yes.
And kind of and serving the community and the Navajo Nation as you need to. What have you all done in terms of the sober living crisis? So since you're justice, I assume that this has touched you, like the Operation Rainbow Bridge and all of the fraud and the horrible things that have happened. So I assume that you all are overseeing that, correct?
Yes. So it's a combination. So that issue was headed up by the Director of Social Services, who technically is kind of interesting. So the Director of Social Services is in charge of this, what we call Operation Rainbow Bridge. And so he's under Social Services, which falls under Health, Education, Human Services, right? But he's getting assistance from law enforcement from the Navajo Nation, which falls under Law and Order Committee. So with that, it becomes a Navajo Nation issue because now, it's not only two committees, but, there's so many different hands in the pot because now you have also our Attorney General that's getting involved. The FBI is getting involved. So there's like all of these different hands. So this is a perfect example of how it becomes a Navajo Nation issue. Now, again, previous example, you have a delegate who say, well, it's just my chapter. I don't really care, what's going on. If they're not speaking up for what's happening, it affects everybody. So to answer your question, there's a lot of things that are going on with the Operation Rainbow Bridge that we've been involved in. We have been overseeing that. In fact, we just got a report not only from Social Services, but we also got a report from the governor's office as well. Law and Order Committee right now, what we are trying to push is that federal charges be brought against these individuals because it was the transporting of an individual across state lines. Either they were incapacitated at the time or they weren't making, there was something involved in them making the right decision in the right frame of mind. So these are things that we do oversee and we try to advocate for. So we have been advocating for the FBI to make these federal charges because there were some individuals who were brought in from New Mexico here to Arizona. And a lot of them, who were recovered, and I say recovered because they, we came down, the Navajo Nation came down, we went in and we knocked on doors and we made sure that some of these facilities were actually legitimate facilities, and we learned that some were not. So in those situations, we did give the individual the opportunity to either come home and we would, bring them home with us, or if they wanted to stay, they could stay because we can't force them. What we can do is try to protect them and give them that chance. So we were involved in that, and we do get reports on it, but we do get a report as entire council because it affects the entire Navajo Nation.
Okay.
And not just one committee.
Right. And we've worked with you all,
Yeah.
Operation Rainbow Bridge and Solarian Access, and we're still seeing a tremendous amount of people appearing here.
Yeah.
That need help. I mean, I don't know, 5 yesterday. I mean, we're still seeing a lot of people.
Oh my gosh.
So it hasn't ended.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of, a lot of people don't know about it, and they should. And I don't think, there's a lot of increased or continued coverage about it, but it definitely is still occurring.
Well, it's really unfortunate that somebody could come onto our nation and take advantage of people like this. I saw videos on like TikTok. I'm very active on social media, but there were videos that were being forwarded to me where there were private citizens getting involved, stopping individuals, from taking, some of our people. And explaining to our people in Navajo like what's going on, and the video that I'm thinking of, there was 2 Nigerian men who couldn't even explain where they worked, what their address was, and it just, and this person went live on, I can't remember which social media it was. I seen it on TikTok, but he went live and he questioned them. And he asked the people, get involved. So people started stopping. So people were actually watching this TikTok video and they were responding, coming to rescue, the person who was in the back seat. So, I think there was information on the nation, but you are correct in that there wasn't very much information off the Navajo Nation about what was going on.
I mean, there's been some, but, I always refer to it as trafficking.
Yeah. It is trafficking.
And they're held hostage, or, we've seen people that have climbed out of bathroom windows and literally escaped for their lives.
It is the definition of trafficking. You are correct. It may not be sex trafficking, which we're more attuned to and we know about, but it is trafficking. Yes.
It is. And that's how I always refer to it, because that's what it is.
It is.
And it's not just a sober living home crisis. It's these people are being trafficked, and it's been horrible. So.
Well, I can say that that there are other tribal leaders who did come out to say, we know what happened with Navajo. We're very sorry, but, we're also worried now, like, are our people there? Do we know, if they're there? Do we know, like, were they picked up and taken there without their will? And so there were other tribal leaders, I think, who have come out to say, yeah, you know what? If you see any of our people, let us know, because we should also be involved in that. If it's happening at Navajo, it's probably happening across Indian country, and we're just not aware of it at this point.
And that is true. We've seen members from lots of different tribal nations.
Yeah.
So let's hope it gets solved.
We'll continue our interview with Navajo Nation Council Delegate Eugenia Charles Newton after this short break. Support for KRDP 90.7 FM comes in part from Native Health, with 2 locations in Phoenix, 4041 North Central Avenue, Building C, near the corner of Central Avenue and Indian School Road, and at 2423 West Dunlap Avenue. Native Health is also located in Mesa at 777 West Southern Avenue, near the corner of Southern Avenue and Extension Road. Native Health provides primary medical, dental, behavioral health, WIC, and wellness services for the urban Native American community. For more information, call 602-279-5262 or visit our webpage at nativehealthphoenix.org.
So I know what committee you chair. Why did you run for office?
So I initially, the funny story is I was a prosecutor prior to running for this elected position. I was in court one day and I was, there was a case involving a child that I guess I got involved in it in a way that I just felt like it, the situation had to be addressed, and it couldn't be something that we, as a prosecutor's office, I couldn't just like stand by and say, well, that's what the law says. So I started arguing public policy, and I remember the judge in that case, got very upset. Not only did he threaten to throw me in contempt of court, but, he made the statement that my job as a prosecutor is not to change the laws of the Navajo Nation. If I wanted to do that, I should run for office. And so that kind of sparked like, okay, yeah, you're right. Here I am arguing public policy on behalf of a child, who I felt like, just wasn't in a safe situation. So I said, okay. So it just so happened that next week was like the closing date of running for council. And I got my application in like at 4:30 on the last day of running for this position, like putting in your hat in the ring, right? So I got it in, barely made it under the wire, had everything ready, got submitted, and that was what sparked me to want to run for office. Was I just felt like as a prosecutor, I saw so many people who were being hurt where the laws weren't really protecting them, and I wanted to be a part of the process that fixed that. And so fixing the laws was something that I really wanted to do, particularly our criminal code, which I've been working on with others and also our committee for, I want to say maybe 4 years. So now we're at the end of updating our Title 17, which is our code book, our criminal code book. And then what I want to do is then update what's called the Achinebebehez-Ani Act, which is our children's code that hasn't been updated for, I want to say like maybe 15 years. So I'm working on that. But that's what sparked me, made me want to run for office, was I just saw that the laws on the nation just weren't working. And with my background in law, I felt like, why not? Why not try to change something from within and see if that helps to better the lives of our Navajo people.
Good for you. Good for you for doing something and making a difference. How many of the council members are attorneys?
Just me.
Just you?
Yeah. Well, so I'm an inactive member of the bar. So there's a law within our code that says if you're a council delegate, you can't engage in the private practice of law. So I'm inactive.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in terms of your background, you're an attorney.
So I did go to law school.
And you practiced law.
Yes.
And you were barred.
I was a prosecutor. Yeah.
And which law school did you go to?
University of Kansas School of Law in Lawrence, Kansas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go Jayhawks. So my former professor actually is the dean of the Arizona State University School of Law. Sandra Day O'Connor School of Law.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And her name is Stacy Leeds. Yeah, she was my former professor she was the one who actually recruited me to the University of Kansas.
How has your cultural identity shaped who you are today, and how has it impacted your career journey so far?
So, I consider myself to be a traditional Navajo woman, and culturally, that does imply a lot of things that shape what people think is a traditional Navajo woman. I have traditional teachings that I've been able to use, and that actually does come in hand when we're talking about shaping the laws of the Navajo Nation, because there is a provision within our codes that we recognize called fundamental laws that we abide by, and within the code it says that we go with the fundamental laws, but if there's no fundamental laws in place, then we rely back on the rules of what we call, the white man laws. And so a lot of the fundamental law encompasses the laws of nature, the laws of culture, the laws of tradition, the laws of ceremonies, just a lot of different laws that make us who we are as Navajo people. So I think I don't think it I think it shapes me as a council delegate, because there's things that I have to remember that are the laws of our people that I have to keep in mind. So there was a council delegate during the 24th Navajo Nation Council who talked about the importance of keeping things balanced. And, and I understood what he was talking about, because we had just at that time confirmed, well, we didn't confirm, what we did was we confirmed for probationary status an associate justice who was a woman. And so there were 3 women on the Supreme Court, who you had the Chief Justice who was a woman, then you had the 2 associate justices who were both women. And so he was a traditional person, who talked about, the balance, like, we need to balance things out. We can't just have, like all women, So, I listened to him and I understood what he was saying, but then I thought, wait, that doesn't make sense though, because almost all of our lives we've had only men. We have had, a man president, a man speaker, a man, for the Supreme Court justice. So on the one hand, like I was kind of enraged that he would make that statement. Like, how dare you? You're a man and you're going to sit there and tell me that, we should balance things out when the history shows things haven't been balanced. But on the other hand, I knew what he was talking about with that balance, because as Navajo people, we're talking about, we learn about the dualities of life. We know about I guess some people say the yin and the yang, right? So we consider half of who we are our male side, and then there's the other half that is our female side. Even the weather, we have male rain, we have female rain. We have our hogans, we have a male hogan, we have a female hogan. And they all, are significant to who we are as Navajo people, but they all play an important role, right? So here I am during the 24th Navajo Nation Council. This is the previous council, sitting there listening, and I thought, I was just like, how dare this man? And then, he started talking about like the traditional side of why that's important, and I thought, that is very true. And so I tried to explain it to the Navajo people, because I said, because people were asking me like, what did you think about that delegate saying that? And I said, on the one hand, like it was very upsetting, because it just what I just said, right? But on the other hand, I understand what he's saying, because traditionally there's some laws and there's some rules that are in place that we just, as Navajo people, we can't bypass that. We can't forget that. And so when I was talking to the group of women, I said, okay, how many of you guys here hunt? And they all looked around and they were looking at each other. And I said, okay. And I said, if I were to ask that question outside of this group here, there would be hands that would go up. Because traditionally, Navajo women were taught, you don't hunt. We don't do that. That's not for us. And there's a reason behind that, right? So when I was speaking to these traditional women who are like the movers and shakers on the Navajo Nation, not one of them raised their hands, because traditionally that's what we're taught. But now, when you look at today, now you have young people who are saying, well, it's my right as a woman. Like I should make that choice. I should decide. And, when usually in that case, I'm like, if you want to go hunt, that's okay. That's going to be up to you. That's going to be your decision. I said, but, for some of us traditional women, I said, we don't do that, because for women, we give life, we make life, right? We're the life barriers. So how can you give and make life and be a part of that when you're taking life?
Right.
That's why, we don't hunt, even though, yes, it's a necessity. So what we were always told is you rely on your husband, you rely on your father, your uncles, your brothers. the men in your family are the ones who should be doing that. But, so much has changed now that a lot of women can probably argue, well, I'm not going to depend on a man, I'm not going to, I don't have to, I don't have to rely, I should be able to go out and go hunt for my family. And I think that that's true. I think that some women sometimes are put in that situation where they have to do that because they don't have males to rely on, and they're not going to let their children starve, or they're not going to let their family starve. So in those situations, I can certainly, see why they would do that. So I just, that's kind of like that interplay that you kind of have to take into, like in my position, what I deal with kind of on an everyday basis. Is like, okay, traditionally, this is the way that some of the rules are, and this is what, we were taught, versus what's going on with today, and how sometimes, maybe we should make an exception or things change, right? So it is, so I think that being traditional shapes being a council delegate, but I also think that being a council delegate also shapes my traditional beliefs as well, because like I said, sometimes we have to think about the people that we represent and the stories that they have and the backgrounds that they have and the histories that they have, to not judge them, but to understand where they're coming from.
Well, I'm very impressed.
Oh,
I just think, what you say and what you do. So what do you consider to be one of your biggest accomplishments?
Oh, wow. Well, so in all honesty, I just learned probably a year or maybe a year and a half ago that a legislation that I sponsored was actually the first time ever in Navajo history that this had happened. But I sponsored a legislation, and it's called the hardship legislation, that gave funding that we received from the CARES legislation from the federal government. CARES was given to us to try to combat COVID, right? So I sponsored a legislation to give the Navajo people money. And what was going on, what we were seeing at council was, although we were trying to address the issue and really trying to combat COVID, we were falling short because, as nationwide there was a shortage of like Clorox, there was a shortage of masks, there was like really a shortage of a lot of things. On the Navajo Nation, that shortage had to be multiplied by 3. Because we didn't have that much to begin with. So when I sponsored that legislation, the intent of it was that the Navajo people knew what it was that they needed to be able to survive COVID. And let's just give them the money and let's let them decide. Why does government have to decide what is needed within the homes? I didn't want to make that decision as an elected official, so my thought was just give it to the people. They know what it is that they need, and it came back. People when this legislation was passed, and it was a fight. It really was a fight. I would have thought that everybody would be on board, but there were only 2 of us that fought for that legislation. Myself and Delegate Vince James. And so I always tell people, remember that there were only 2 delegates who fought for that funding to go to the Navajo people. But when it did, people came back and they were sending me pictures of stuff that they used that money for. So one family bought their entire family bikes. And I know that there were some delegates who were like, bikes, that's not a necessity. Well, it was a necessity at the time because COVID was happening. They you couldn't go to your regular hangout spots, and I felt like the bikes encouraged, healthy living.
Exercise.
Yes, exercise, family time,
yep.
Transportation, exactly. And those bikes would last them, a lot longer than, something else, right? So another family, when they bought, mom bought her kids a bunk bed. It was the first time that these kids had a bed. And some people might say, well, how's that going to combat COVID? Well, when you have multi-generational families living in one home, you make the best of a small room. I know, because I'm the ninth child of 12. So there was 12 in my family, and we had a 2-bedroom, 3 bedrooms. So my parents had a bedroom. Then there was what we call the boys' room, and then the girls' room. But the girls' room had 3 bunk beds in there. And so each one of us, had a bed. So to me, that was important because we had such a large family and a small house that bed means so much. If at the end of the day you can get into your own little space and get a good night's sleep, which, is healthy.
It's exactly it. It's healthy.
Exactly.
And it, so you're not going to get sick.
No.
Right.
And that was the thing was okay, people are not seeing that and right. how this kind of relates to being healthy, the bike, the beds. It was an amazing feeling, but that was probably something that I'm proud of. And I just learned a year and a half ago that was the first time ever in the history of Navajo, our Navajo people, that funding was given in that way to the Navajo people.
So what advice would you give to someone who wants to enter politics?
I would say that it's very, very important to be attuned to your community and to your people. Most importantly, what the needs are out there. Especially, like I said, if you're attuned with your community, you're going to know, what issues are within your community that you have to face, that are going to be out there. I would also recommend that they grow a thick skin, because not everybody is going to love you, and that's not your job, is to make everybody love you. Your job is to do the right thing on behalf of the people that you represent. And sometimes people are not going to agree with it, and that's okay, because everybody, has differing opinions. So I would definitely say that they need to grow a thick skin and understand that there is good criticism and there is bad criticism. It's criticism at the end of the day, but you take it, as you get them. I would also recommend to our young people, stay off of social media. Everything that's captured on social media will be used against you. Thankfully, I grew up in an age where we didn't have that constant camera in our face. But I think that a lot of our young people right now are not really thinking about 10, 20 years from now. They're kind of just thinking about living in the now, living right and, just today. But I think that that's one of the, values that was instilled in me is that the decisions you make today are going to affect your tomorrow. So make sure you make the right decisions and think about it from all angles. Try to think about what you're doing. So I would definitely give that advice to them. We're in a new age right now where everything is captured on video.
I know they don't think about that.
They don't.
I have a friend whose son posted his arrest papers, and I'm like, why would you ever post your arrest papers on social media? I'm just like, and even if you pull it down, it's still out there.
Yeah.
And people can still get it. But that's really good advice. Finally, how can our listeners find more information about you, your work, and how can they contact you?
So I do have a Facebook page on, I'm very, like I said, very active on social media. So I do have a Facebook page where I update. I used to update every week, but because things have been so busy lately with this new council coming in, that I haven't been able to update, but I do update when I can. And my updates last from an hour to 2 hours. I talk about what's going on at council. I talk about the work that I'm doing, upcoming issues that we should be aware of. And that's actually why I'm here in Phoenix today, is because I'm meeting with Arizona State University on developing an intellectual property code for the Navajo people. So, and I did talk about that. So I'm very active on social media. Follow me on Facebook. You'll get information, straight from the delegate. It's not what we call jene, it's not secondhand information. And I usually try to show proof to the people to say, look here, it's in black and white. I'm showing you, whether it's an email, whether it's documents, whatever it is. I usually do try to provide that information. I think that that's one of the things that a lot of people have commented on and why they follow me is because I do show them, whether it's the law, I show them in black and white. This is what the law states and this is what we have to follow. So even though you wanted me to vote this way, we had to follow the law.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you're an attorney and you know all the ins and outs of the law.
Well, yeah. I mean, and that's an advantage. Yes, it is.
Well,
yeah.
I
So
think that's a big advantage.
I am on social media. My cell phone number is posted on social media. It is 928-257-0476. I carry my work phone with me all the time. I always say that this here technically is the Navajo people's phone. This is how they should be getting a hold of me, and they do. And so I share it on the radio stations back home. I share it on my social media pages. I share it when I'm on council floor. I share it, I give out cards with my cell phone number on it. I do advise people, though, if you can, text me. Don't call me, text me, because text actually allows me to be able to read the message. But if I have to get back to it, then I can just pin it and get back to it later on. Whereas if I get a phone call and I'm driving, I don't have, I can't, sometimes I can't pull over to write the message down and I forget about it because we're so busy. So I always encourage just text me. But my number is 928-257-0476.
Well, I got to say, I've been so impressed. We made a whole show out of this. You've been incredibly impressive and patient and informative, and I've learned so much that I didn't know, and really a pleasure to meet you. And I really, really mean that. I've had a great time. So thank you for your time, and we appreciate you coming in to Native Talk Arizona in Phoenix and visiting and learning more.
I appreciate it. Anytime you guys want me to come out, I'd be happy to do that.
Love to have you back.
Sounds
all right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Native Talk Arizona, supported by Native Health and KRDP 90.7 FM. Audio editing by Javier Quiroga, and the executive producer is Susan Levy. And I'm host Lanasha Puari. We hope you tune in again next week. If you have any questions, please email us at nativetalkaz@radiophoenix.org.